This wasn't that long ago. It wasn't until after that night that I even knew about the awful stories other people had posted about Craigslist. Stories that made my stomach turn. I had always trusted it as long as I used common sense. Apparently, though, I didn't follow my own rules. This all happened during the first month after I moved into my new place. A lengthy cross-country move into an area I barely knew. I'd sold off almost everything before leaving, so for the first few weeks my house felt sparse and unfamiliar. Out of boredom and necessity, I would scroll Craigslist, looking for furniture or small things to make the place feel lived in. Before then, I had successfully picked up a few items without a problem, so I wasn't overly nervous about it. One evening after work, I came across a post for a couch that looked nearly perfect. A gray sectional in apparently very good condition, listed for $200. The seller replied quickly. His name was Brian, and his messages made him sound like a normal, easygoing guy. We agreed on the price and began to coordinate how to get the couch. The snag was logistics. I only had an SUV and could probably fit only one piece of the sectional at a time. He lived in the neighboring town, which meant multiple trips. When I mentioned my problem, he offered to use his pickup truck to deliver it to my house. Of course, I wanted to see the couch in person first and felt uneasy about giving a stranger my address. But the idea of a direct drop-off was so much easier. So after thinking it over, I agreed. We were set for him to swing by my place at 5:30 the following day. I went to bed early, and in the morning I texted him my address, then spent the afternoon cleaning the other rooms and making the house look presentable. As it got closer to 5:30, I sat in the living room watching TV with the blinds partially open. Almost exactly at 5:30, I saw headlights and a black pickup slowly drive past. There was no couch in the bed, so I assumed it was just a neighbor and kept watching. A few minutes later, the same truck came by again, and this time it slowed as if someone was looking at my house or peering through the windows. It made my skin crawl, but I dismissed it as coincidence. I texted Brian to double-check he was still on his way and waited. After that text, the truck didn't come by again and Brian never replied. He never showed up. An hour after the scheduled time, I sent another message and discovered it wouldn't go through. Later, I learned the number had been deactivated. At the time, I assumed he had ghosted me. Maybe someone else had offered more money or something had come up. I was annoyed more than alarmed. I made dinner, set up my office, and eventually fell asleep watching YouTube. I don't remember actually falling asleep. I must have dozed off during a video and been out for a couple of hours. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke to a sound that filled me with dread. The creak of the front door. It was the long wooden squeal unique to that door, one of those noises you instantly recognize because it always makes you wince. Someone had opened it. I lay still and listened, heart pounding, and could hear footsteps moving slowly through the empty house below. The echo made every step unnaturally loud. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs, and several seconds of silence stretched out. Then a man's voice called my name. It was a deep voice, older sounding, flat and monotone. He called again, the same neutral cadence, like he knew I was upstairs and was merely announcing it. I whispered to myself, frozen with fear, and reached for my phone. I called 911 in the quietest voice I could manage because I didn't want him to hear me speak to the operator. I crawled off the bed and into the closet, heart hammering, every muscle tight. From the cramped dark, I could still hear him calling my name at the base of the stairs for a little while longer. Then the voice stopped. After a few minutes of silence, police arrived and cleared the house. Whoever had entered was gone. I immediately told them about the Craigslist listing and the truck that had driven by earlier. I had his number and was sure it had been the same man. The officers explained two frustrating facts. The number was deactivated and therefore untraceable, and even if they identified who owned it, there might not be enough evidence to link that person to the break-in. They told me the lock appeared to have been picked. I kept replaying the night in my head, thinking maybe his plan had been to lure me to his place where he would have been prepared. And when that failed, he tried to come to mine. It made no sense that he stood at the bottom of my stairs calling my name and then left, but maybe he panicked or changed his mind. The uncertainty was worse than anything tangible. In the days that followed, I did everything I could to feel safer. I changed the locks and installed a camera that streams to my phone, added motion-activated lights and a smart doorbell so I could see and speak to anyone at the door without opening it. Friends offered places to stay and urged me to move, but another sudden relocation wasn't realistic. I didn't have the savings or the energy for packing up again, and the house already felt mine despite the violation. I altered routines, blinds always closed, lights on timers, a trusted neighbor holding a spare key. Every creak made my pulse spike, and every truck passing the street tightened my shoulders. I replayed his monotone voice and the slow creak of the door until the questions multiplied. Was I targeted, or was this random? Had he planned to meet people at his place and then decided to come here? Why call my name and leave? The police were sympathetic, but limited without a traceable lead, and while the new security measures helped, I couldn't shake the memory. Neighbors checked in more often and the small kindnesses helped, but the knowledge that someone crossed my threshold and stood at the bottom of my stairs calling my name is lodged under my skin. Sometimes I wondered if he ever intended to hurt me or only meant to frighten later that night. I slip into the habit of scrolling through sites like Craigslist and eBay whenever I'm bored, a kind of aimless online thrifting where you sometimes stumble on things you didn't know you needed. This story happened back in 2018, so it's not recent, but it still rattles me when I think about it. I had been browsing Craigslist and found a listing for a bin of housewares, candles, picture frames, little knickknacks, the sort of random decoration that could make my sparse apartment feel like somebody lived there. The seller's name was April, and her messages were friendly and practical. She told me she was moving and just wanted to get rid of anything that might break in the move. For $20, she said I could pick whatever I wanted, or take the whole lot if I wanted everything. The deal sounded perfect. We settled on meeting at a grocery store parking lot after she got off work at 6 on Thursday. I finished at 5 and drove straight there. The lot was busy, people coming and going. Standing beside my car, I noticed I couldn't see into the SUV's windows. Maybe they were tinted. Maybe the dim made them opaque. I didn't linger long. The cold made me want to get back inside, and my nerves made me want to go. I was there only a few seconds when a man stepped out of the SUV. He looked to be in his 30s, dark hair under a heavy winter jacket, and he was smiling in that way someone does when they think they're doing you a favor. He told me April couldn't make it. She'd been held up at work, but he'd brought the items and could give them to me. He added casually that because of the inconvenience he'd let me take everything for free. That small, offhand kindness felt like bait. I wondered why I hadn't been told ahead of time someone else would come, why the substitute wasn't mentioned in a text. The lot was empty except for us. If this were a crowded place, I might have felt safer. He opened his trunk and motioned for me to come look. I stepped back toward my own car instead. I told myself I'd call April just to confirm, a quick practical safeguard, and the man's smile tightened. I tapped April's number. My phone buzzed with the dial tone then. Impossibly, I heard my phone ringing from the SUV. He reached into his pocket and stopped the sound mid-ring. My stomach dropped. The sudden mirroring of my call felt like confirmation of the wrong thing I'd feared. He started moving toward me as I fumbled to start the car. Everything happened so fast after that. He hurried up to my door, and I turned the key and pulled away, heart pounding, headlights cutting through the lot's dim. I left without looking back, convinced in that instant this was a setup, a lure masked as a Craigslist sale, designed to bring strangers into an empty place. When I got home, I called my sister. Voice shaking, told her what happened, and she told me to call the police. I did. The officers were sympathetic but blunt. Since no contact escalated to an actual crime and there was no proof someone had pretended to be April before I arrived, there was little they could do. It was maddening. It felt, and still feels, like a warning that barely landed in time. The only comfort was that I left when I did. Sometimes I replay the moment I decided not to cross that parking lot toward his open trunk. I imagine everything that might have happened if I'd stepped forward, and I don't like where my imagination goes. I don't know who that man was, whether there was ever a real April, or how many other people he might have tried to draw into an empty lot with the promise of cheap home decor. The not knowing is its own kind of dread. All I can do is tell the story and hope nobody else gets a late text sending them to a shadowed parking. I'd lived a quiet, ordinary life in the city for years. Same condo, same commute, same small routines that make a place feel like home. When a couple things in my apartment started breaking this week, calling a handyman felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Problem was, I didn't own any tools. To avoid the expense, I turned to Craigslist, hunting for a used kit. There were more listings than I expected. Some were scams, some overpriced, but I eventually found a kit that looked serviceable at a price that made sense. The seller replied quickly and told me I could pick it up the next evening. His address was 45 minutes out of the city, a tiny cluster of houses tucked into the woods. On the map, it seemed quaint enough. 100 roofs, a lot of trees. I hesitated for a second, then decided the price was worth the drive. The road grew darker as I left the city behind. By the time I arrived, the few storefronts were closed and the houses looked older than any I'd seen. Porches sagged, paint peeled, and many windows were dark. The silence pressed in. I told myself urban nerves were exaggerating things and parked at the end of a gravel driveway in front of a narrow, tired-looking house. When I knocked, the sound carried too clearly in the hush. The door opened to reveal a man with long, messy brown hair and a scruffy beard who looked like he hadn't worried about appearances in a long time. He led me into a living room where a single weak lamp fought the shadows and a heavy canvas tool bag sat on the couch, full and ordinary. One of the hallway doors hung crooked on its hinges, as if it had been forced. I pretended to check the tools because that felt sensible. I'd brought cash and wanted the exchange to be quick. When I turned to hand him the money, he wasn't there. The room felt suddenly emptier. I called out his name and my voice sank into the old house. There were soft creaks, the noises old timber makes, but nothing that explained his absence. A figure filled the hallway, taller and broader than the cellar, his features swallowed by shadow. He said nothing. He simply stood, effectively blocking the way to the front door. I told him casually I was stepping out to my car for cash, hoping politeness would move him. He remained still. Then the kitchen door swung open into a blackness that seemed too complete to be ordinary. Something moved in there. A sound like a footstep, wrong in rhythm. And whatever rational reassurances I'd been giving myself vanished. Instinct lit up. I bolted. I ran for the broken back door I'd seen earlier, and behind me the house answered with the thunder of multiple footsteps across old floorboards. The yard had no fence, and the dark trees gave me a path. As I sprinted toward my car, someone exploded from behind it and raced into the woods. I don't know whether that person meant to stop me or to create a diversion. There were too many unknowns. All I knew was I had to get inside, lock the doors, and get away. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. I drove off the gravel and didn't look back. At home, the adrenaline sat heavy. I kept the engine running with the lights on for a long time, watching the rear view like I was expecting a shape to follow. I'm certain there were multiple people in that house. Whether their aim was robbery, something more sinister, or just to scare, I can't say. The not knowing colors the memory as much as anything else. A simple thrift buy had nearly turned into a dangerous, shapeless thing. The image that stays with me is the canvas bag on that couch. Ordinary, useful, and almost banal. And how thin the line is between doing something practical and stepping into real risk. Since that night, I avoid meeting strangers in remote spots. Now when I come home and shut the door, I do it with the quiet relief of someone who prefers ordinary routines to unlit porches and the kinds of silences that make shadows feel like people.